Yes, my crew neck does say Yee Yee University. We love Curtis Connor in this house. Hi friends, welcome back, or just welcome if you're new. My name is Emily, and today we're going to chat about Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. I have my clear frame blue light glasses on. I got them on Amazon on Prime Day, and I'm in love with these. I think they look so good. Although on camera, it does sort of make me look like I have no eyebrows, but I'm super dedicated to the aesthetic, so I'm gonna keep wearing them. Quick announcement before we get started. I know that I said that I was gonna kind of get back on track with my regular video schedule for the month of October. Obviously, that did not happen. Balancing school and friends and family and this channel has all turned out to be a little bit more difficult than I anticipated it to be. So, as a result, I think I'm gonna have to cut back to only uploading every 2 weeks. If I come up with a video that I really want to post, but it's like an off week, then I'm still gonna make the video and post it. But just as a general rule of thumb, it'll probably just be 2 videos a month. Just a little bit of a decrease in content just until I can kind of get back on the horse with all the stuff that I have to do. But thank you for your patience and thank you for your support. Now let's get into Wicked Saints. Huh? Okay, here's the deal. I saw Wicked Saints all over TikTok and everyone was raving about the enemies to lovers and the intricate world. And so obviously, as a huge fan of intricate worlds and enemies to lovers, I picked this up. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I have no idea what just happened. I really don't know why. Maybe I just didn't understand it and everyone else did, but I was so incredibly confused. But we will get into that after the summary. Wicked Saints follows Nadia, a girl blessed with magic by the gods of her home country, Kalyazin, and Serefin, a blood mage and the high prince of Nadia's rival country, Trinavia. The two countries have been at war for a very long time, and the tide is finally turning in favor of Trinavia. Obviously, Nadia can't let that happen, so she teams up with a ragtag group, including a mysterious boy named Malachias, in order to take down Trinavia's king. Serefin, meanwhile, has suspicions that his father, the king, is about to do something horrible, and so he is also on a quest to stop him. Serefin's and Nadia's stories intertwine near the end, and honestly, they get into a bit of a mess. Alright, so I just have to come out and say it. Serefin slaps. I really liked him, and I really liked his banter with his two pals, Casper and Astia. Also, side note, if Serefin and Casper get together at some point, I will not be upset about that. I do have to admit, though, that some points of his characterization were sort of weird, especially his conversations with his father. I understand that Serefin and his father are estranged, and Serefin hates his father, and his father hates Serefin, but the fact that Serefin has these weird, one-off, snarky lines, it's just, they're so cringy. But other than that, Serefin's character, incredible. I want to talk about a point that I made in my notebook. It was close to the beginning of the book, only a couple of chapters in, and I wrote down, "Someone tell me why I'm already in love with Serefin." Oh, that's right, he's morally gray with long dark hair and a tragic past, and honestly, I just kind of called myself out. He's great. We love that about him. On kind of that same note, Malachias is also pretty cool. You know, morally gray, long dark hair, tragic past, you know the drill. I will have you know that I watched a 14-minute interview with Emily A. Duncan so that I could learn how to pronounce Malachias, and then I wrote down the phonetic pronunciation in the front of my book because I didn't want to forget, and I was reading it totally wrong in my head after I looked up how to actually pronounce Malachias. I feel like I'm still pronouncing it wrong, but it's a good enough pronunciation for reading it in my head, so I guess it's a good enough pronunciation for me to speak to the entire internet. I do have some things to say about Malachias once we get into the spoiler section, but I did just want to note, while we're on the topic of morally gray characters with long dark hair and a tragic past, that I also thought Malachias was cool. I guess I'm really just a sucker for Russian and Slavic inspired fantasy because I really liked this world. So obviously it reminded me of the Grishaverse because I read those books first, but it didn't feel like the same world as the Grishaverse. Also, in that same interview that I watched where I learned how to pronounce Malachias, Emily A. Duncan said that she created her own languages for Kalyazin and Trinavia. She didn't use traditional Russian or Slavic languages, which I thought was also really cool because obviously she was inspired by those languages, but she created something completely new. And I don't really have any experience with conlangs, but I know that they're super hard to create. And so the fact that she poured that much into the creation of this world is super commendable. All right, one last little thing before we get into the spoiler section. This is just something that I thought was really funny. So in Trinavia, their court fashion is to wear masks. And so obviously, of course, I was thinking, ah yes, the court fashion of our day as well. But there was one particular quote that just hit a little too close to home and just kind of made me laugh a little bit. So this is page 206 in my copy. Nadia had only been wearing her mask for a day, and already she was fantasizing about ripping it off. It was hot and uncomfortable, and she didn't want it on anymore. And honestly, if that doesn't speak to how I feel every time I go out in public, I don't know what does. That being said, please wear a mask, my lovely people. It's just a way to be kind and to keep yourself and others safe. I know it sucks, but we're gonna get through it. Okay, now that we've entered the spoiler section, I can talk about just how damn confused I was reading this book. Like, what? Maybe I just didn't pick up on enough stuff, or I read it too quickly. I did read the last half of this book in one night, but I don't know. I was just very, very confused most of the time, especially with all the stuff where Serefin gets back to Graziek and is trying to figure out what his father is plotting. I feel like I missed a key point of information about what Serefin and Casper and Astia are all talking about, but the fact of the matter is that we just didn't get that information. It just wasn't there. And so we were left to kind of pick up pieces with an incomplete picture. I just felt totally out of the loop. I didn't really know what was going on, at all. And on that note, because of that, Serefin's side of the story was much weaker than Nadia's until they actually intertwined the stories at the end. It was just difficult for me to grab onto what was going on, so I didn't really like Serefin's side of the story that much, but also I liked Serefin's character. I don't know. It was just an all-around kind of strange experience. On the topic of me not knowing what's going on, how many times did Malakia switch sides? Because I feel like it was a million. I swear, I never knew what was happening in that boy's head. And obviously he didn't have a POV, so that would make sense. But I just feel like we should have had some sort of clue instead of being completely in the dark all the time. Because obviously keeping your readers guessing is super important, but also not keeping them guessing to the point where they feel like they'll never understand the answer. You know? At the end, when Malakias became the Black Vulture, fully and flew away. Did he even want to do that? Does he even want to be the Black Vulture? Is there still a human portion of him inside? Hello? I just didn't understand. Another thing that I noticed, and it kind of took me a while to put my finger on what exactly it was that I just didn't feel like there was a lot of detail in this book. Some of the world building was good, obviously, because I did end up liking the world, but for the most part, it just kind of felt like everything was happening in a vacuum. Especially the fight between Nadia and Felicia. There was a crowd there, but we didn't hear them cheering or booing or making any sound at all. It felt like everything was just so centered on the action that there was no room for anything else, when there was room for other things to talk about other stuff, but it just didn't happen. And as a result of that, it felt like the stakes were really low, even though I knew that they were really high, because there wasn't that external description. It was all internal, which obviously I love internal dialogue, that's my thing, but you have to have some external stuff to balance it out, because you have to know why these characters are feeling the way that they're feeling, and I wasn't really able to sympathize with them. And now for a rating, I'm going to give Wicked Saints 3 stars. I enjoyed reading it. Again, like I said, I really liked Serefin and I really liked the world and all of that stuff, but it just felt super confusing and it fell a little bit flat for me. I'm looking forward to the sequel though, because I do want to know what happens to these characters, if only so that I can stop asking myself literally what just happened. On a more positive note though, favorite quote time. This one comes from Pelageia, who is Serefin's mother's witch. And this is when she is speaking to Nadia, Serefin, and Malakias when they're all together with her and they've all kind of discovered each other. Pelageia says, "But then there is my magic, except a witch is just a girl who has realized her power is her own." So this quote kind of spoke to me because I've actually been studying the portrayal of women as abnormal or monstrous in pop culture and society kind of by accident. I joined 2 groups at school who are both kind of talking about the same thing at this point, so I'm reading books and watching films about this monstrosity of women. Basically, it just boils down to this. In our patriarchal society, many men are afraid of women who take charge of their bodies and their minds and their hearts and their souls, and as a result of that, when women do that, men tend to demonize these women and paint them as something to be feared rather than something to be celebrated. And the fact that Nadia embraces Pelageia's words of a witch is just a girl who realizes her power is her own, and Nadia realizes her power, is such an incredible thing to read about. Nadia has always relied on something or someone else to tell her what to do, like the gods, the people at the monastery, even Malakias at some points, but now she's finally taking charge of herself and her life. She's taking charge of her power, and that's such an important point of discussion to talk about now, to talk about back in the day, to talk about in the future. It's just all around, a really interesting thing to talk about, and I thought that that was a really cool quote that kind of encapsulated that whole idea. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you so choose, and I will see you next time. Happy reading!